I'd like to start with a quote that I believe is implicitly and explicitly helps crystallize our challenges and our successes and our contemporary moment as movement of folks concerned about sexual violence. Quote, "Those who profess to favor freedom yet deprecate agitation are men who want crops without planting of the ground. They want rain without thunder or lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. They want struggle. The struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without demand. It never did, and it never will." Anybody know who said that? Frederick Douglass spoke very poignantly about power, and power, or more precisely, the struggle for the power needed for freedom and for self-determination. It is constantly threatened by those that would seek power in order to dominate others. Power in and of itself is not a bad thing. We like to feel powerful, and we work to empower the disempowered. And when individuals organize in a collective body in resistance to those that would have power over them, we are able to produce change. And when that is sustained, we have movement. The work that everyone in this room does is part of a global movement for social justice and equity for women, children, and men. And the labor that you exert on a daily basis, as much as it is about positively impacting the lives of individuals, it is equally about providing the necessary fuel to power a movement that changes society at its structural and institutional levels. So, what do I mean by that? I have another quote for you. This one is, "Men are committing the rapes, let them be put under curfew." Who knows who said that? Anybody?
Golda Meir.
There you go, very good. You cheated. You don't get to answer anymore. As it happened, during a cabinet meeting in the Israeli government in the 1970s, there was a discussion about a recent spate of sexual assaults. One cabinet member suggested placing women under curfew for their own protection until the rapes had abated. Ms. Meir, apparently no avowed feminist, nevertheless recognized the ridiculousness of such a suggestion and responded with the aforementioned quote. In so doing, at a micro level, this quote's simplicity exposes how victims are made responsible for the violence of others and demands that responsibility be placed where it belongs, on perpetrators of violence. But at the macro level, it also exposes how victim blaming is used to distract us from what I wistfully call the trinity of tyranny, which is not to be confused with the unholy triad. People know what unholy, if you want to know what that is, ask me. But the trinity of tyranny, that is the endemic sexism, misogyny, and patriarchy that many of our cultures and societies experience. For you prevention folks out there, these become the attitudes, knowledges, and behaviors identified for community norms change. Everybody got that? Prevention folks? Now, some of you may be asking, what does my rape survivor care about patriarchy? Or what does that have to do with the fact that right now, at this moment, in Sacramento, somewhere, an individual may be raping another individual? What happens to victims of sexual violence matters at multiple levels. In addition to the trauma that is felt by individuals and their loved ones, the manifestation of such violence marks our bodies as the terrain whereby male dominance is asserted, is sexism, gendered violence expressed, misogyny, and society articulates its priorities, patriarchy. Your day-to-day work brings home that the personal is indeed political, as it is very much about the struggle for power. The trinity of tyranny has a long legacy as it relates to rape, and the documented etymology of that term dates back to the 14th century, meaning to seize prey, or to take by force, or to seize, carry off by force, and abduct. Viewing females as the property of men allowed males to violate females and young males in many societies, and if caught, allowed fathers to claim damages to their households. This speaks to the value of females in societies in relation to males. And we have plenty of other examples in contemporary society where this is continued, practiced. And if you think about the baby preferences that are given in certain societies or certain cultures. Some of those societies are now experiencing problems in terms of all the young men who are growing up and don't have any women to procreate with. That's another issue that they hadn't quite anticipated. It speaks to the value of women in our societies in relation to males. Where do we see other manifestations of the devaluing of females in order to prop up the dominance of males? Everywhere from the old practice of burning widows, using rape as a weapon during war, to clitoridectomies, to sex trafficking, drug dealing, breast ironing, etc. But just as damning can be how we as women sometimes internalize this oppression and become complicit in aspects of the trinity of tyranny. We don't have to go to those extreme examples. If you think about the coded behavior of think about the way we code the behaviors of our daughters and our sons. As an example, years ago, Peace Over Violence, in conjunction with CALCASA, implemented a statewide campaign called This Is Not Invitation to Rape. Anybody here familiar with that campaign?
Yeah.
And it's actually, if you just Google that term, by the way, it is just kind of exploded all over the internet. Like, it's been replicated in so many different ways, as art exhibits and other campaigns in other locations, including Scotland. So we did that campaign. We did it with CALCASA, and some of you out there, you know, took the call at the time to issue for putting this campaign out there, which was to be expected. But what we had not anticipated is how the campaign uncovered kind of ideological cracks in our degrees of feminism. Specifically, some of our sister agencies took issue with a particular spot that had scantily clad females dancing in a club scene. Some argued that we were contributing to the exploitation of women. But what we did not expect was opposition based on the belief held by some of our allies that women dressed in this manner were somehow complicit in women's victimization. What we took away from that experience was not an opportunity to be elitist or snobbish or anything like that, but really what we really realized was that as a movement, our feminism was not and continues to not be monolithic. That there are some are the equivalent of being fiscally conservative yet socially progressive, however you're able to pull that off, and others remain more radical in their approach to doing this work. The anti-rape movement has, over the last 40 years, which is widely attributed to being birthed out of both civil rights and the student activist movements of that era. Much of it was very radical and diverse along the lines of both race and sex. According to the Office of Victims of Crimes Training and Technical Assistance Program in the early 70s, many of the rape crisis centers were radical feminist organizations, considered as such because the goal initially was not reform, but a total transformation of ideologies, power relationships, and the existing social structure. Revolution. They were feminist because they were organized by women seeking to overhaul the existing power structures with its, quote, male voices being heard, where typically male voices were heard first and more often than female voices. They also recognized that the first goal had to be to establish a female base of power structure within their own organizations, because if they could not affect the power change within the rape crisis centers, they certainly would not be able to stop rape in larger society. Now, over time, as this movement went from the liberty and creativity afforded by radical feminism and moved toward a mainstreaming of the movement, which carried with it responsibilities, no longer just to our constituency, but it also embraced responsibilities and accountability to funding sources. A few of the first rape crisis programs in the country, some of which are represented here today, began in 1971. And that included street education and self-defense and protest rallies. All of that accompanied the work of these early movement activists, along with having conversations with survivors about their victimization and the violence that they had endured. By the end of the decade, however, so in 71 there were 2 or 3, we don't know, the jury's still out, we're still waiting on the DC rape crisis to figure that out. We had 3 at the beginning, but by the end of the decade, there were over 1,000 rape crisis centers nationwide. Much of the work of these early activists was done voluntarily, meaning that they didn't have salaries, they didn't necessarily have constant funding. You heard Linda talked about our first funding for the state of California occurred in 1980. So that meant that many people were doing this work in their kitchens, in their homes, in their own offices, wherever they could find space and come together collectively. And they were doing it as volunteers, committed to a cause and a movement. And they did this because people were committed to the cause as activists, as all of you all are. But two things would come along that would fundamentally alter the evolution of what began as a revolution: race and money. What a surprise, right? It's pretty well documented how early on race was another one of those elements that revealed feminist ideological dissimilarities. Many white women who felt that because they were members of an oppressed group, felt as though they could not in fact be oppressive, in this case as it relates to race. There was, and in many organizations still today, an assumption that white women's experiences were universal and therefore demanded no differentiation among the work in things like recognition of the need for a cultural context in serving the population, and recruitment practices for both volunteers and hiring and management practices, training, mentoring, diverse leadership, or fundamentally, just in recognizing how race and racism plays a part in victimization in communities of color, which can then reverberate once various systems and programs are engaged. Money came along and largely in the form of government funding, and with that were a few strings. This is not necessarily a bad thing. However, many of the more radical voices were marginalized, if not silenced, which included many activists of color, queer women, and immigrant advocates. Many of them went to form on their own collectives, such as the Combahee River Women's Collective. Money also carried a wariness or a caution and suspicion of conspiracies aimed at just shutting women up altogether. It also had bureaucratic and performance-related activities, filling out fact sheets and doing quarterly reports. We just want to do the work. But those things came along with it also, and those activities created a shift from a largely volunteer and paraprofessional labor force to one that had to be more, quote, skilled, and professional as staff. While some may feel that we've lost some of our edge, hey, we're 40 years young, right? Well, we're 40. Our position within the mainstream has provided measures of sustainability for both service provision as well as our activism in the movement. Knowing our history is critical. So just a little, trivia. No offense, because rape is not trivia. The first statewide code, we know who the first agencies were, or at least we know the kind of legends behind who the first organizations were. What was the first statewide coalition? Anybody? It's documented. I heard some whispering over there. Anybody? Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape. You said it. Did somebody say it over there? You said it. Do you know which year? 1975. What was, okay, so here's another one. So what was the first year that marital or spousal rape became criminalized in the United States?
90.
Did you say 90?
Yeah, 90. 89? No.
1975, actually.
Oh.
I see some high fives over here. Do you know which state that was in?
California?
South Dakota.
Wow.
Nice, huh? And I forgot to write down the last state to criminalize marital spousal rape. But the year that the last state came on board and made rape within marriage a crime, anybody know what year that was? 93. Good. And then, okay, here's one for you. Who knows, and Patty, you can't answer this, neither can you, Sandra. Who knows CALCASA's original name? You, Ellen, you can't answer. No CALCASA staff. It didn't just flow off the tongue. It did not just roll off your tongue. It was not
With California State Coalition, California State Coalition of Rape Crisis.
Say it, Betty. Say it.
California State Coalition of Rape Crisis Centers.
Very good. California State Coalition of Rape Crisis Centers, or CSCR, CSCRCC.
C-crack.
It was C-crack, is that what you said? C-crack, I love it. Now here's one for you that you can dispute it all you want, but shows you the power of elevator conversations. Who suggested the name change from CSCRCC to CALCASA? It was me. Standing at an elevator in a conference a long time ago, we knew we needed to change the name because nobody could remember or say CSCRCC or C-crack. That's a nice one. And we were thinking about how some of the other statewide coalitions were using CASA, like TASA or Illinois and so on and so forth. And someone said C-CASA, and we said, no, that already exists. And I said, why don't we do CALCASA? And we were like, yeah. And then it became the name. Very, I don't get any, where's my payout for that? Anyway, yeah, this is how I get repaid. It's all good. You should be proud of your coalition. Your coalition was, in 1993, produced or co-produced a national conference with the then SCCBW. Anybody know what SCCBW was?
Statewide California Coalition Combating.
It was before it was statewide. It was Southern California Coalition Combating. Absolutely. And it became folded into another larger statewide coalition with another organization, which is now CPEDB, California Partnership. Very good. But back then, it was C-crack and SCCBW came together. The Women of Color Caucus for CALCASA and the Women of Color Task Force for SCCBW came together and organized a national conference looking at violence in communities of color. And it was called, the conference at that time was called The Color of Violence. And it was well received around the nation. And in 2000, a group called Insight Women of Color Against Violence would hold their own Color of Violence, Violence Against Women of Color conference at UC Santa Cruz, which we are very happy about and applaud. But remember, your coalition did it first. And I think oral traditions are fabulous, and I think, passing on our history and our legacy orally is a great thing, but you gotta write that stuff down, you gotta document it. If you don't document your history, others will. Today, some of our more radical feminist ideals of revolution have evolved into what we now recognize as mainstream, or professional organizations signaling a shift from reforming the system and structures of society that foment a rape culture to an emphasis on serving client survivors, while quietly doing our reform institutionally, ostensibly from the inside out. Thanks, Linda. Thanks, Nancy. But also working in multidisciplinary teams. When you sit and meet with the local DA and law enforcement and hospitals and so on and so forth, we are making our revolutionary change. Where we remain resolutely radical is in our commitment to survivors and going the advocate's distance to get the survivors' voices heard, their day in court, or resources needed so that they can just trooper from day to day. Ladies and gentlemen, that is change. Now, yesterday after Patty Sage's and Newcomers exercise, it was clear that our movement and our individual organizations and our coalition is dynamic and going through a dynamic cycle of change. To some, it may feel like we're experiencing an internal revolution. We may swing to the left and then to the right, but we always reach an equilibrium or a middle, which is to be determined. And I would go so far as to say it's never really actually fixed. It's always changing. So we really don't know what that's going to look like. In my estimation, there are two guarantees in life. Death is one of them, and change is the other. Kind of ironic. But you and I, we are dynamic energy, carbon-based life forms that are intrinsically bound up with our material world and its social forces at play. Stuff happens and we respond. We make stuff happen. Cause and effect. There is a significant demographic shift in our coalition and in our organizations. We have, as I found out, we have, for the first time, multiple generations working and living together in our organizations. We have baby boomers, we still have a few World War II folks, people born during that era, baby boomers, Gen Xers, and the millennial generation. So those of us who've been around have a responsibility to shore up our foundations, strengthen our foundation, but be open and embracing of change, because it's a coming. So when we're presented with things like Slut Walk, we are given an opportunity to reflect and look internally and really examine how have we fostered this? What have we done to encourage this? What have we done to embrace this? What have we done to marginalize this? What have we done to denounce it? Does Slut Walk get to emerge as a result of having not felt like part of the larger movement? Is that an attempt to recapture and reclaim some of the more radical aspects of the movement from 40 years ago? We don't know, but there are lessons that can be learned from many of the young emerging movements that are all over the internet. I saw one yesterday called DoSomething.org, and it's just about young people. It says explicitly on their site, we don't require the help of old people. Wow. Right, so young people, guard against hubris. We have to, there are things that we have to retain, but then there are things that we have to kind of pay attention to and figure out if there are new ways or new strategies of doing things that we've done in the past. Is my time running out? Is it gone, David? So I'll jump to my conclusion there. So in our contemporary moment, which is called a number of different things, postmodern, post-race, neoliberal, neocon, late capital, technological, globalization. If nothing else, we have to recognize that where we are right now as a people, as a movement, is fragmented. Fragmentation is not necessarily bad, it just means that we have to pay attention to that and we have to manage it. Our attention span generally lasts the length of time it takes for us to scan what the latest tweets were. Right? There's a new one. But thankfully, we do have the ability or the power to cohere, as we are doing this week, and to make some linkages, the past with the present, and strengthen our ties, differences, and commonalities, and reaffirm and reassert our commitment to our collective struggle. The power to liberate women and those who care about women, and those that women care about, in an effort for everyone to be able to live their lives free from sexual violence and oppression. I'd like to say thank you to CALCASA for allowing me the honor to stand before you and share some thoughts and reminisce, but more importantly, for allowing me to be held accountable to my own activism. And I thank you all for the work and struggle you endure. And in summary, I'd like to just leave you with a few things. Be proud that you have intentionally embraced your power, strategically challenge your power, and strive to empower the disempowered. Be proud of your movement, one that is dynamic, flawed, but does not shy away from controversy or the tensions that shift our terrains but keep us on our feet and keep us smart. Be proud of your feminist foundation. It is from the radical feminists emerging out of those civil rights and student movements that generated our current movement. Be proud of your ability to stand up to the status quo, whether it be patriarchy or sexism or homophobia and heterosexism, or other forms of dominant culture that render minority populations invisible or marginal. Be proud of change. It's inevitable. As we recognize our longevity, those of us who've been around, in some instances for decades, cannot be in denial that change. She's a coming. For those of you new to the movement, guard against hubris. Latch on to a mentor and soak up as much as you can. Trust me, it will make you invaluable. And finally, be proud of your coalition. It is here to act as a unified voice, an advocate for the field, a resource, a trailblazer, and a partner in ending sexual violence. Thank you.